everything we have worked for the past 10 years, including our home. The wind ripped off the roof of half of our house and most of our business. We did not have water, electricity, or communications, and we could not leave the area of our house. We felt abandoned and forgotten. The news brought by people who came to help were horrible. In Punta Santiago, where I grew up, the sea went more than 50 miles inside the town and flooded homes with almost 6 feet of water. Some people had to fight the hurricane winds in the roof of their homes for the fear of drowning inside. Many had to sleep for days and weeks in their still wet cars because they were homeless. I did not receive help from the government, not even a blue tent to cover our roof from the rain. FEMA only gave us $1,000 to pay a month of rent. I have to admit that my anger and indignation were enormous. How we were supposed to fix our house when the damages were estimated at more than $40,000. We didn't have enough savings to fix it, and what we have, we use it for the emergency, to buy diesel for the generator, and to buy clothes for my children, and finding a clean bed when my kids could sleep. We did not want to leave our island, and we did not have money to do it either. It was frustrating because through our married life, we had been able to adjust to our reality and move forward. We refused to give up, even if we have to start from scratch yet one more time. Now, even making adjustments, it was not in our hands to have a better life. No matter how hard we work, we did not make enough money for our needs. Finally, in October 3, 2018, with only $50 in my pocket, I arrived in Atlanta, and thank God I found a job that allowed me to bring my family with me. That day, last December, when I saw my kids coming out to the airport in Atlanta, was one of the happiest days of my life. Leaving my island without my kids was one of the most terrifying things for me. I didn't know how long it will be before I will be able to see them again. Climate change is real. I never thought that I could survive something worse than Hurricane Georges, but Maria taught us a tough lesson. Beyond seeing this as a tragedy, I have begun to see it. I needed to see it as an opportunity, to use it as a spearhead for new and better things. Maybe from Atlanta, my voice can be heard in DC. Maybe that is my purpose. Everything happens for a purpose, right? If my voice can be used to raise awareness and hope of a better future to those who are still trying to get back on their feet, my adventure in Atlanta and now speaking here with you will have been worth it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kriku. And now, certainly not least, but Dr. Michaels.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. My name is David Michaels. I'm an epidemiologist and professor at the Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University. From 2009 to 2017, I served as Assistant Secretary of Labor for OSHA, the longest serving in the agency's history. From 1998 to 2001, I was Assistant Secretary of Energy for Environment, Safety, and Health, charged with protecting the workers, the community residents, and the environment in and around the nation's nuclear weapons facilities. Today, you've heard powerful testimony of 3 individuals who were impacted by the disinformation campaigns directed by the National Football League, manufacturers of opioids, and the fossil fuel industry. Each of these cases is a variation on the playbook perfected by the tobacco industry. Starting in the 1950s, the evidence was clear that cigarettes cause lung cancer, but Big Tobacco understood that by inventing a debate on the science, by claiming the evidence was in dispute, that more research was needed, it could continue to sell its deadly product. Its profits would not be endangered. Eventually, the industry was forced to acknowledge the truth that only after hundreds of thousands of people would become addicted to a product that would ultimately kill them. The denial playbook has been widely embraced because it works. The strategy disingenuously demands proof over precaution in matters of the public good. For unethical corporations, there is no better way to stymie government efforts to regulate a product that harms the public or the environment. Debating the science is much easier and more effective than debating the policy changes necessary to protect people. In America, people are innocent until proven guilty. Products, though, have no such rights. We should and we must consider them dangerous until proven safe. For decades, the fossil fuel industry has turned the presumption of innocence upside down, manufacturing doubt to make their deadly products look safe, while demanding that their harm be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Here's how this playbook works. The industry defending its product will commission scientific studies with flawed methodologies guaranteed to generate predetermined results. It will demand the raw data from studies done by independent scientists, then reanalyze that data to reach different conclusions, alchemy that's easy for the experienced, if unethical, data cruncher. It will hire scientists, often outside their field of expertise, to make pronouncements that their product is safe or there's not enough evidence to take action. It will plant articles, often ghostwritten, which selectively promote the results of studies that favor their products. It will hire opinion leaders and publish op-eds under their names and create front groups to make it look like there is widespread opposition to controlling the exposure in question, and so on, and so on, and so on. These campaigns are no more than public relations efforts disguised as science. The corporations and their hired guns demand that policy be based on, quote, sound science, but what they really want is something that sounds like science but isn't. In the case of tobacco, the scientific evidence became overwhelming, and after decades, the industry finally admitted the truth. The NFL has recognized the jarring hits that cause brain damage in football players. Big Pharma has finally acknowledged their opioids are extremely addictive. This denial playbook has caused the sickness and deaths of millions through its use defending tobacco, opioids, asbestos, lead, PFAS compounds, and many, many more toxic products. But in the face of overwhelming evidence, the fossil fuel industry continues to follow the tobacco road. These corporations are defending a product which will be far deadlier than tobacco unless we take urgently needed action. This industry is still funding scientists to manufacture doubt and is still lobbying against meaningful climate action. And too many of our legislators continue to believe their lies. Please, make no mistake. There is no real debate in the scientific community. The accumulation of atmospheric carbon threatens to dramatically break down climate systems, and this will cause severe damage to our environment. If we do not take immediate action, these changes will make much of the planet uninhabitable, increasing extreme weather events, raising sea levels, reducing our food supply, and altering in terrible and tragic ways the lives of billions of inhabitants of the Earth. Thank you for pursuing this very important matter.
No, thank you very much. And, now I'll just take an opportunity to ask some questions. But, last week we learned that the notorious climate denier, William Happer, is going to be named to President Trump's pick to lead his, what could be only charitably called as ironically named the Committee on Climate Security. As you know, Mr. Happer is a former head of the George Marshall Institute, a conservative think tank with a long, long history of denying climate change. Do you have any recommendations on how to best combat denial campaigns like those of Mr. Happer and the Marshall Institute?
Well, look, we know what's going on here. The White House is putting together a stacked committee that's going to meet in secret to give a rigged result. The trade ambassador said something about, at one time, something like, my job is to listen to the president and come up with the analysis that supports whatever he says. And that's what this committee is going to do. Now, the alternative, which is something that the United States has done for 150, 170 years, is to look to the national academies. In 1862, Congress chartered the national academies to deal with these tough scientific issues. It's the arbiter of science, and they use the best scientists in the country, and in an open process that's transparent, that has public input, to look at these issues. And what we should be doing is saying, there's no reason for a fake committee to be put together to meet in secret by people who already can tell you what they're going to say. We should be looking at these very well-balanced committee of the top scientists of the country and look to them for advice.
No, thanks so much. Mr. Hampton, thanks so much for sharing your story with us today. I'm sure it's not easy to really relive those experiences, but we're grateful to have you here to help us better understand how these industries will just go on to any length and even putting human lives at risk just to meet their bottom line. In your testimony, you mentioned that since you started recovery, you've spoken with several physicians, including your own former doctors, and I guess what are some of the pharmaceutical industry strategies that you've learned about in talking with these folks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the most part, these doctors had told me, you know, the success by the sales representatives for these pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors, you know, they tried to get physicians to forget all the conventional medical training, everything that they knew, you know, believing that opioids were safe, and it rested on the premise that these doctors, that these companies would not knowingly hide or ignore the risks of opioids, or that they could kill people. And I don't believe that any rational person would actually do that. So these doctors took the pharma reps' information at their word. You know, I think it's normal to assume that an entire industry would not knowingly harm people. But the hundreds of thousands of deaths from opioids and what we know today and how they were presented under false pretenses is proof that there is such a thing as malicious groupthink.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're dealing with the consequences of that today. Mr. Borland, with 3 boys and a wife who is a pediatrician, I got a text from her that said, thank Mr. Borland so much for his testimony and for keeping our kids out of football. And so,
oh boy.
But you know, it's in your testimony, you talked about the partnership between the NCAA and the Department of Defense in the CARE Consortium, and which is spending millions of dollars to study the effects of concussions, or to study concussions and their effects. And you also mentioned that your teammates at the University of Wisconsin were actually participants in the study, but they've not reported concussions to the study's directors. This means that the data in the study is going to be incomplete, to say the least. And why do you think your teammates weren't reporting their concussions, or were they discouraged to doing so by the NCAA, the overall industry, or so on?
Teammates and athletes aren't explicitly discouraged from reporting concussions, but the nature of the value of that position on the field. A scholarship is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. A potential spot in the NFL is worth millions. And so I believe that the NCAA and Department of Defense's inquiry into the issue doesn't take into account those circumstances. Players are highly disincentivized from reporting concussions. Also, I think there's a lack of education. Many players competing at that level don't understand that subtle symptoms like slight dizziness or ringing in the ears is in fact a concussion. And so partnered with the circumstances and with the lack of education, players routinely put themselves at risk.
No, thank you so much. And Ms. Pricu, I want to thank you so much for being here today and being a voice for those U.S. citizens and the residents of this country's beautiful island territories. And as you described in your testimony, Puerto Rico was your home until Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria ravaged the island and gave you no choice but to leave. I think you were amongst some of the 300,000 that we referenced earlier as leaving the island after the hurricane. And when you hear people say that climate change isn't happening, or that these storms are just normal occurrence, what do you wish you could say to them?
Well, the fact is that we, as an island, we have experienced, in my lifetime, I have experienced like, I don't know, 7 maybe storms and hurricanes, and every single time is worse. The last major one was in '98, Hurricane Urgis, and you know, it was really bad because I've never seen the sea coming to the town. So that was the worst thing that a person probably can experience, you know, trying to be safe in their own homes and have to look for shelter in their own roof, right? So we didn't get, maybe because of the denial of everybody, right, that we can have something, or we can experience something worse than that, it was pretty much impossible for us to realize that every time that they announce a hurricane or a weather situation in Puerto Rico, we will have to fight for our lives because we never thought that it would be worse than that. So, and it happened, Maria. And then it's pretty scary for us because just the fact that you see that in a tropical island, obviously we are used to get those systems, but we are not used to get granizo, how do you say that? Hail or maybe temperatures in the low 50s. Something is happening. Something is happening, and we are really, really afraid of have something major than Maria, and it's a real concern of for all the citizens back in the island.
Yes, and certainly it's, unless we do something today, it's not going to get any better. But Dr. Michaels, in scientific research, obviously the findings are only as good as the methodology, and if the data is collected in a way that's incomplete or biased, the findings are also going to be incomplete or biased. And that's why it's so important that when we see statistics and scientific conclusions, we critically evaluate how those conclusions were reached. And if you could comment on some of the techniques that denial playbook scientists use to reach their biased or even false findings, and are they actually changing data? Are they collecting it in a way that's incomplete? Certainly similar to the way that Mr. Borland kind of described earlier.
Well, I try to go into a little of that in my written testimony, and you could see it, though. I mean, there were plenty of reports of some of the studies done by the National Football League, which were simply incomplete data. They didn't even attempt to find complete data sets, the number of concussions to follow, and that was true, actually, of the studies done, or the fake studies done, and showing that we had something, for example, called pseudo-addiction, which was really based on one study, and you suffered through that. You essentially saw that they claimed that if people wanted more drugs, it wasn't really addiction, it was pseudo-addiction. But what you now have is this whole industry, this whole sector called product defense. And these are scientists who, a lot of whom actually worked on tobacco, who will ask for raw data and of a study done by government scientists, by academic scientists. And if you know what the answer is, you could then go back and essentially change some assumptions. You could say, well, these exposures really were very different, and we'll put those numbers in, and you'll come out with a result that's non-significant. And I've written a book on this. I have another one coming, which shows exactly how different product defense companies did this. They get the raw data, and they essentially shuffle it, put different parameters in, and then they could say, no, you know what? That study found something else. And then you have equal and opposite studies. They're published in peer-reviewed journals, though they're their own journals and they peer-review them, but they'll publish them. And they'll take it to a regulatory agency, or they'll take it to a court and say, well, that study says this, but when we analyzed it, it says this. And then it happens that you have, essentially what you saw earlier today. People have to throw their hands up and say, well, we can't deal with this. It's nefarious, and it's a big problem that sets us back. And if the NFL had hired honest scientists at the beginning, we would have understood much more about CTE 10 years earlier. And if the big drug companies hadn't played with the data, we would have recognized 10 years ago how bad how addictive opioids are. And we're paying the price across the board for this, and certainly in climate change, probably the worst.
Well, thank you so much for that, and that's why we're here today to hear this in the public sphere. And Mr. Borland, as you were saying, the data on concussions is often underreported, and I guess what do you think will be the ultimate results of using this incomplete data on concussions, and will the research reach accurate conclusions about the effects of contact sports on CTE? And at the end of the day, what can we do, or what can scientists do to make these studies more accurate?
Well, I think, of course, the studies will yield inaccurate results. As I mentioned in my testimony, there's somewhere between 1 in 8 and 1 in 20 concussions is actually reported. A secondary effect of inaccurate studies is, I think, a mismessaging, particularly to youth athletes. If you are entering college or the professional ranks and you consider the risk to be lower than it actually is, you won't have the appropriate concern that you may have otherwise. Also, I think one thing that is omitted in the CARE Consortium is care. College athletes are only insured for 5 years beyond their career, and afterwards the buck is passed potentially to taxpayers for their long-term health care costs. So the profits have been privatized and the costs have been socialized, and we're left to pay personally and then collectively.
Oh, thank you so much, and Mr. Priku, thanks for taking the time once again to share your story with us, and I mean it's compelling to me for so many reasons. It just sounds so scary to live through something like that, have your economic security taken away. And I'm also concerned because the conventional economic wisdom is that young working families are the engine of economic recovery for the island, right? So when you're gone, the prospects are certainly dimmed for such a beautiful and resourceful place. But you mentioned that you survived the hurricane in '98, and I guess, was there something that made you stay after the first one but leave after Maria, and what was different?
Yeah, but that time, it was like a huge issue. We were 2 months without power, maybe a month and a half without electricity, without water service. But I lived with my parents, and I had a secure roof where I can go and feel safe. This time, not only the hurricane destroyed my home and my way of living, but also it destroyed almost all the possibilities that we have to todas las posibilidades que teníamos para salir adelante en términos del trabajo.
Oh, hi, Mr. Chairman. All of the possibilities to keep going on with life.
The conditions of the country doesn't allow allow us to have like a formal job in my case, I try hard to make my way with my real estate business, but the condition of all the properties that were in the inventory back in the island, they were almost destroyed. They were not in a proper condition to be sold. So we have no choice by that time. And also I had 2 kids that I have to provide for. So it was a tough decision, but it was the only one that we have.
Thank you so much. And we're going to be concluding just shortly here, but the one thing I really, when I talk to my colleagues, we're going to go back and vote later on today, and when I speak to them, I want to give them a very, very short, 1 or 2 sentence thing about, one thing that, I would like them to know, and which you can convey through me to the, something that the American public should know about how the industries deceive the American public. If you can maybe just provide, the one thing that I should be conveying to my colleagues there.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I think it's really important that when it comes to public safety, health and well-being, the only information, the absolute only information that can be trusted is from disinterested, qualified third parties. To me, it is unconscionable that today in 2019, that this playbook is still so front and center. And I just want to reiterate, when it comes to my cause, I almost lost my life as a result of this playbook. I have buried over 24 friends in the last 2.5 years to overdoses because of misinformation. And the fact that this is still happening today is just out and out wrong. You cannot trust industry when it comes to presenting information, when it comes to the public's safety, health, and well-being. And that, I just want to put a very big exclamation point at the end of that for your colleagues.
Thanks so much. Mr. Borland?
The one piece of disinformation I think the NFL and NCAA have propagated is that there's a safe manner in which to play football. There's 3.9 children 18 years and younger playing tackle football. The notion that you can safely tackle someone is oxymoronic. I made 420 tackles at Wisconsin, over 100 with the 49ers. It can't be done in a way where your brain stops moving inside your skull.
I think my wife would agree with you there. Ms. Precu?
Este foro trata acerca del denial y muchas veces las personas, el ser humano tiene la realidad de frente y no se da cuenta hasta que se afecta directamente por las situaciones. Yo entiendo que no podemos permitir que situaciones mayores pasen que nos afecten de una manera mucho más crítica para entonces tomar acción con respecto a lo que es el calentamiento global.
This forum is about denial, and we don't realize the seriousness of the issue until we have to see it spread. So go beyond what talking in regards to climate change. We have to see the extreme outcome of what happened, in this case in Puerto Rico, and to act. So we have to take action so that we avoid any other reoccurrence, just like the one that she lived.
Thank you. And Dr. Marcos?
And I'll agree with Ms. Precoup and talk about climate change, which is really the most pressing issue facing all of us right now, that there is no longer a debate in the scientific community around the fact that greenhouse gases are building up. We are seeing climate breakdown, not even climate change. And it's no longer acceptable to essentially parrot the phony excuses that the sea levels are rising because of rocks falling into the sea, which actually a member of Congress actually said at a hearing just last year. This is the moment where we need to take immediate action. And I think in terms of talking to your colleagues, ask them what they will tell their grandchildren when their grandchildren ask them, what did you do when it became abundantly clear that unless we take some action, this earth will become a much more difficult place to live?
Thank you very much. I can tell you is that, you know, with this new Congress, one of the most diverse Congresses ever, and certainly it's one of the least political new freshman classes. And the reason why we were elected to Congress, and the reason why I'm sitting on this committee today, and the reason why we had this forum today, is because we're no longer going to deny the science. We're no longer going to deny the data. The truth will eventually be told, as it was in the tobacco industry, certainly with CTE. And climate denial, you can put your head in the sand like some of my colleagues here, or we can do something about it today. I do agree with you. I don't think there's a bigger threat to our globe and our country than climate change, and we're seeing things today. So I want to thank you so much for your testimony, you know, about this denial playbook and how it's been used over the years to, you know, for these industries to keep selling their products, even if it hurts people, or, you know, Mr. Hampton knows all too well, tragically also kills people. And we've heard from each of you about how the climate, or the denial playbook has impacted your lives. And I want to, once again, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today and for being here today. Thanks so much. With that, we will adjourn.
It's okay.